Awesome. That is so cool. Well, good morning, church. It is great to be with you. And again, let me just add my own happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I brought all 5 of my kids with me today because there's free childcare over there. So I am taking advantage. They're all over there right now. And hopefully you have a way to celebrate. Chris, I like your gift idea. That's pretty clever. I just send Amazon links to my wife and just be like, this is what it is. And today I'm going to get chicken wings. That's like the thing, that's how I celebrate. So hopefully you have something as well. It's great to be with you guys. We're in week 2. Going through this series looking at signs, and hopefully you've realized by now you can communicate a lot through a sign. And in fact, you can have just an image or something that you see and you've learned like, oh, that's what that sign means. And I just have always been fascinated by signs that we have on a road, signs that people make, just how we communicate visually with one another. So here's a few signs that I found recently that I just thought were interesting. You've got this one that the positioning's a little interesting. Don't save a life. Be afraid to give blood. It's the way I read that, and I think someone probably had that differently in their mind when they wrote that up. But, you can communicate a lot through a sign. Or this one's particularly awesome. Cotton chicken candy nuggets. I'll have one of each. Like, that sounds awesome, and just another way to communicate. Or this one maybe is my favorite. At the bottom it says, we can't believe we had to make this sign. I mean, you just realize how much gets communicated in an image. And we've been going through the book of John and looking at how signs in the book of John are to point us to the person of Jesus and to communicate that we find life in Jesus. And so today we're going to look at the stop sign. What do we get from this sign, and how do we see Jesus in this way as well? Now, a stop sign doesn't exist just as a killjoy. It doesn't exist just to end your momentum. It exists to save you from something that could potentially be very bad, right? To stop you from something that you may be doing. I remember when I was a kid riding my bike one time, and I had this idea that as a kid, because I didn't have a driver's license and I wasn't in a vehicle, that signs didn't matter to me. And so I remember being on my bike as an elementary school kid, seeing how fast I could go through our neighborhood. And one time, I got this little route where I could get going really fast. And I blew through this stop sign. And I'll never forget this as a kid. There happened to be a neighbor whose house was on the corner of the stop sign. And the neighbor saw me just fly through this stop sign and just went off on me. I mean, belittled me and yelled at me, and it was like, do you not know what that sign means? And I just remember, like, I'm on a bike, I didn't think it applied to me, and just, I'll never forget. So, like, when I got assigned the stop sign image, all these flashbacks to my childhood came back to me. The day I was on the bike, realizing, oh, maybe I should be aware that I could still get hit by a car, even if I wasn't in a car. Like, that was a helpful learning lesson for me. But the stop sign encouraged us to slow down, to look around, to yield to others, and to make a decision about which direction we're heading. Now, when it comes to life, I would suggest that we could avoid some bad decisions we make if we would use this sign a little bit more, right? Like, maybe you can think back to moments in your life, you're like, I just wish I would have stopped. Like, I just wish I would have slowed down that season I was in, or that thing I got wrapped up in, that it could have turned out different. I mean, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is just stop. Just stop. Stop whatever you're doing. Stop the flow you're in and just go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I need to change something here. I need to be present in this moment. Now, today we're going to look at probably one of my favorite stories in the Bible. I mean, when Chris gave this to me, I was like, this will be so fun. I love communicating on this story. We're going to look at Jesus turning water into wine, which I think is one of the coolest stories, things that Jesus did. This is a story, if you have grown up in church like me, you have heard Christians explain away this story, maybe your whole life. I have certainly heard all sorts of explanations to tame this story, because this story is a little bit edgy. It's a little bit weird, and so we're like, whoa, hold on, let's put some qualifiers in of what this means and what it doesn't mean. And today I want to show you this story is even wilder than you perhaps thought. So if you were trying to tame it, we're going to go the other direction. I'm going to show you this is a bizarre story that shows us something interesting about Jesus. Now, if you like this idea and you're like, this is pretty cool, I actually host a podcast called Cabernet and Pray, where we drink wine and talk about theology. Yeah. And if you are interested in, hey, what does this whole thing have to do? And Jesus is going to do it. This is where I got the idea for the podcast. He was the first, host of it. But we basically just sit around. We talk about God over a glass of wine. And if that sounds cool, check out the podcast. If you're like, hey, this is not my thing, don't worry. Chris will be back in a few weeks. All right? So just hang with me today. We'll get through it. You're going to be okay. Now, we're going to look at John chapter 2. And we'll begin the story in verse 1. It says, the next day, there was a wedding celebration in the village of Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the celebration. The wine supply ran out during the festivities. This is the ultimate bad news. If you are the host of a party, a wedding celebration, the one thing you do not want to have happen is the wine to run out at the party. But that's the situation. The wine supply runs out. So Jesus' mother told him, they have no more wine. Interesting thing to say to Jesus. Dear woman, that's not our problem, Jesus said. My time has not yet come. But his mother told the servants, she just ignores him, do whatever he tells you. I love this exchange. Now, standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Each could hold 20 to 30 gallons. So Jesus' mom comes to him and points out just something obvious that they all were aware of. Hey, Jesus, they don't have any more wine. This is kind of like when my wife comes to me and says, hey, we need to take out the trash. Right? What does that mean, guys? Take out the trash. Like, that's a nice way of like, can you go? She's like, hey, Jesus, they don't have any more wine. Wink, wink, right? Like, hey, this is, something that you have the ability to do something about. Now, when my wife says that to me, she's just asking me to go do a simple chore. Jesus' mom is asking him to bend the laws of nature. Slightly more impressive, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna ask you to do something supernatural here. Now, I want to ask a question that perhaps you've never thought about if you've read this story before. Here's the question. How did Mary know that Jesus could do this? You ever thought about that? Like, we just go, oh, cool, yeah, I know where this story's going. This is cool. But just stop and assume you're there in real time. How did Mary know that Jesus could do something about this? Now, on my podcast one time, I interviewed a winemaker from California, and I went and toured his vineyard in preparation for that episode, and we were walking around, and we were talking about faith, talking about his faith and his journey with God, and he was showing me all of his vines and what he's growing. We started talking about this story, and he had a take on this story that I have never heard before. And I have grown up in church. I'm a second-generation preacher. I've preached the story dozens of times. And he said something to me that I thought, I've never heard that ever before. And his theory was this, that the reason Mary said that to Jesus is because Jesus had done this before. Isn't that an interesting thought? He's like, my theory is that Jesus had done this before, which is why Mary has an idea of like, oh. And so the way he worded it to me is that she probably said to him, hey, Jesus, do the thing. Do the thing that you do. Do the thing. And he just suggested, do you think Mary ever came home from a hard day and put her feet up and was like, wow, today was tough. And Jesus said, I got you, Mom. Here's a glass of wine. Right? Like, did Jesus ever do that for his mother? Now, I like to think that he did, because I think that would be pretty awesome. If you have this ability and you use it to, love people, like, that's pretty amazing. You can create the best wine your mother has ever had in her life when she gets home and you just, hey, Mom, I took some sink water, and there you go. Like, the best wine you've ever gonna have. I think it's interesting to ask the question, at least, how did she know? Because clearly she believed Jesus could do what he's about to do. So at least stands to reason that perhaps he had done it before. Now, there's a detail in this story that I think is the crucial detail to understanding what's going on here. It's the detail that's easiest to overlook, that we normally blow right past this detail. But if you want to understand the story, I would suggest that you've got to focus on when they take these water jars and they turn them into wine, we got to ask, what were the water jars for? Now, we just assume, yeah, well, they're there, and John says that they're there in the story, so big deal. But no, John explains why they're there, and the reason why is probably the most important detail for us to make sense of it. This was in verse 6 that we just read. Standing nearby were 6 stone water jars used for Jewish ceremonial washing. Now, this is where we got to go into the culture a little bit, because it's very different than our culture. In our culture, if you were going to go eat and have a meal and you would wash your hands beforehand, the reason you're washing your hands is to get germs off, right? Like, hey, I've touched some things and I don't know where my hands have been, so I'm going to clean them before I eat so that I don't bring any of those germs. I'm not going to contaminate my food and what I'm about to eat. That is not why they washed. They washed ceremonially. This was an outward, this was like a practice of worship. Like, hey, before we're going to eat, this is like praying before a meal, much closer to what they're doing here. They are ceremonially washing their hands. It's a ritual that they have before they eat. And so they believed that you were spiritually holy by doing this physical act. That is not how we think of these things. That's not how we wash our hands. But you've got to understand their culture, how they used these jars. That's what they were there for. Before you would eat, you would have this ceremonial washing to get everybody ritually clean before you have this meal. Now, fun fact, Jesus often got in fights with the religious leaders over this. Like, he constantly battled them against this. And we have numerous examples. Here's one in Matthew 15, where we find Jesus arguing over this. It says, some Pharisees and teachers of religious law now arrived from Jerusalem to see Jesus. They asked him, why do your disciples disobey our age-old tradition? For they ignore our tradition of ceremonial hand washing before they eat, which indicates Jesus and his disciples didn't do this, right? And they clashed against their culture. Now, Jesus replied, and why do you, by your traditions, violate the direct commandments of God? So they went to battle over these kind of things, over, hey, you have to ritually wash your hands to be clean before you can eat. And Jesus went, no, I'm not doing that. And you can see this tension building. Now, what we have to realize in John 2 is that Jesus is repurposing a religious item. That's how you have to understand from a Jewish point of view. He is taking something for the Jewish culture of worship and he's repurposing it. Now, this is a very offensive thing for Jesus to do. Now, this is hard for us to come up with a modern day parallel because we don't have many cultural things like that. Here's the closest I can give you. Imagine if we brought the baptistry down in front and we brought it out here, filled it up, and we invited some kids to swim in it. Would that be weird to anybody? Now, probably you would have a weird reaction to it if you saw them literally just cannonballing into it, getting out and jumping back in and splashing everything around. That's the real reason you don't have a carpet, by the way. This happened, fun fact. No, but can you imagine just watching a bunch of kids splashing around, having a great time in a baptistry? If you're honest, and you've been around church a while, there would be a party that went, No. You don't do that there. That's not what that's for. Now then, if you were to logically explain that to someone, you might have a hard time. Because they would go, well, what's the issue? It's just water. Well, yeah, but the water in that area is not for that. But how is that different than a pool? Well, it's not really, but we don't use that, right? You would have a hard time explaining. You just know it feels weird. That's not what that's for. And that is what you have going on in this story. So Jesus is like, well, there's water jars over there. I can use them for this. And everyone else is going, No. That's not what those are for. We don't use them for that. You see, church, if you've been around long enough, can quickly become about traditions and expectations. And if we don't ever check it, those can get out of control. And Christianity can quickly become about traditions and expectations. And if we don't ever think about them, they can kind of take over. And here we find Jesus going directly up against the traditions and the expectations of the culture around him. And then we keep reading in verse 7. Jesus told the servants, oh, he's kicking into gear here, fill the jars with water. The servants are going, oh, no big deal. This is what we do whenever someone eats, right? We fill these up. We're going to do a hand washing. No big deal. We got it. So when the jars had been filled, he said, now dip some out and take it to the master of ceremonies. Now this is the part where the servants would have all froze. I'm sorry, you said what? You want us to serve the hand water? Serve it like in a cup? Like to drink? You want us to give our boss the hand water to drink? I mean, you can imagine them looking at each other like, oh, we're hosed here. We're about to get fired for this. Like, for sure, if we do this, there's no coming back. Because that is not what this water is for. You didn't drink this water. It was for washing your hands to be clean. And Jesus says to them, go and serve it. Now, remember what his mom had said. Do whatever he tells you. So these servants are like, this could go really bad. Now dip some out, take it to the master of ceremonies. So the servants followed his instructions. I imagine their hands like, here you go, sir, like shaking, like this is going to go so bad. He's going to be so mad when he discovers this. When the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, of course, because he would never have drank it had he known where this came from, not knowing where it had come from, though, of course, the servants knew, wink, wink, he called the bridegroom over. A host always serves the best wine first, he said. Then when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you have kept the best until now. This miraculous sign at Cana in Galilee was the first time Jesus revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After the wedding, he went to Capernaum for a few days with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples. I mean, this story is so radical. But here's what's fun. We have enough details in the story to do a little math. And I always love when you have enough details to do this. So how much are we talking about here? What kind of quantity was involved with this miracle? Well, we find out that there's 6 jars, and we know from the text that each holds 20 to 30 gallons of liquid each. And we know that they were filled to the brim, so we'll assume 30. Now, this would mean 180 gallons of water that's going to become wine. Now, on average, a gallon of wine equals about 5 bottles as we would know them today. So if you're doing the math quickly, you realize Jesus just made 900 bottles of wine. Show of hands, how many of you have been to a party with 900 bottles of wine? Because if you have, let's be friends. You sound like you live a great life. 900 bottles? That's ridiculous. 900 bottles after they drank all the wine they bought for the party. Jesus shows up and says, hey, check this out. 900 bottles of wine? I mean, Jesus is practically his own winery now. I mean, he's like, look, I'm going to be distributing these. You can, order monthly club. I mean, this is an absurd amount of wine. If we were to say conservatively, these are $30 a bottle, which this was like the best wine they'd ever had, so it would be way more than that. But just, we'll make conservative numbers for us today. Let's say you could charge $30 a bottle for each of these. That means Jesus just gave them a $27,000 gift of just wine for this party. Now, another way of looking at this first miracle is that Jesus does time travel. What do I mean by that? Well, water turns into wine, like there's natural things that happen, right? That's how we discovered wine, right? So you can make water turn into wine. It just takes a while. It takes years, and there's a lot of things you got to do to it, and that had already been happening. Like they had already known how to turn water into wine. They just knew it took years, except Jesus does it in an instant. So Jesus takes something that takes us years to do, and he does it in a moment. He's traveling time here. He's doing something that cannot be done. Now, when you read the details of the story, you're like, this is scandalous. Like, this is a little bit out there. But we often miss why. Why is this story scandalous? Here's what I would suggest. The scandal is not that Jesus used alcohol, which is what we think today, but that he repurposed a religious item. That was the offensive part for them. I can almost assure you, no one was mad that he made wine. No one was mad the quantity of it. They were having a good time. What they were certainly mad about is how he did it. Hey, Jesus, that's great that you wanted to give us some wine. That's awesome, but not like that. Like that was not okay the way that you chose to do it. But part of people believing in Jesus, part of this sign pointing people to Jesus was moving people away from religion and into the person of Jesus. Away from all of these traditions and all these expectations. Oh, here's how you do it. Away from that toward the person of Jesus. So Jesus will always invite you to see beyond your tradition, beyond your expectations, beyond the way your culture has taught you. And the same is true today. We will not find life in religion, but we will find it in the person of Jesus. Now imagine this. Imagine if anyone else had tried to solve the problem that day. Imagine if anyone else said, okay, we're out of wine. All right, what do we do? Hey, you two, go to the nearest winemaker and see how many bottles you can get. We don't have a lot of money, but just see what you can come up with. Okay, that would be a very logical way to solve it, and they would have come with a handful of bottles. And it would have still been a very sad party. Or maybe they would have said, okay, here's the deal. We're running out, so we're going to start diluting this wine, 50-50, water, wine. We got to make this last longer because, we are running out. And then the party would have been really bad. Not have been the same. Any other solution other than the solution that they got would have led to a much different outcome. And so here's what I want to close with today. Jesus can take a disaster and turn it into a party. And that's not just true in John chapter 2. Jesus can take a disaster and he can turn it into a party. So as we think about this traffic sign, here's the faith step for us today. Stop striving and start trusting. And what would it look like to give Jesus what's empty in your life? Rather than saying, all right, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to get creative. I'm going to really come at this one differently. What if you said, hey, I've got something that's empty, and I can't do anything about it, but maybe Jesus could. Maybe if I would just stop, and invite Jesus in, that this could end differently. So my question for you today is, where do you need to give Jesus something that's empty in your life? Where do you just need to go, hey, I'm trying to solve this. Something's not gone the way I planned it, and I'm working really hard on a solution, and it's not going well. What if you just decided, hey, I'm going to stop. I'm just going to invite Jesus into this. I'm going to see what Jesus wants to do here. Maybe you're in a relationship that feels like it's falling apart. It could be a marriage, it could be a family, it could be a friendship, and you're trying really hard. Maybe you need to invite Jesus into that, to give Jesus what's empty. Maybe you're anxious about money right now in your life, and you're working harder and harder and harder, and you need to stop and invite Jesus in. Maybe you've messed up somewhere, and rather than acknowledging it, rather than dealing with it, you're working to make it right. You're working just to smooth it over. Maybe you need to give Jesus what's empty. Maybe you feel numb or tired or burned out, but you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. Jesus going, just stop. Stop. Maybe you just feel overwhelmed with the world right now. But you just keep going through the motions. You don't know what else to do. Jesus is going, just stop. What would it look like for you to give Jesus what's empty in your life? And rather than coming up with your own solution, inviting Jesus to turn a disaster into a party. Let's pray together. Jesus, we're in awe of how you solved the problem in John chapter 2. We would have solved it very differently. But thankfully, your mother was there, and she invited everyone just to slow down, to not rush to their own solutions, but just to stop and invite you to do something. And there may be all sorts of things that we're doing today, Jesus, that we're trying to solve our own ways, and we're trying to figure out our own ways. May we see that we have the same kind of invitation, the same kind of sign, just to stop. To stop and have a moment where we invite you into it, to see what you might want to do, how you might direct us differently, how you might change our course or invite us just to rest in your presence. Maybe invite us to turn our attention away from what we've been focused on to something different. We know what it's like for things not to go well. We know what it's like to have a plan and watch it fall apart. We know what it's like to wake up and have the unexpected happen. And yet the challenge for each of us is to be willing and able to stop and invite you in, to realize that you are here. You are present with us. And even when things don't go our way, you walk that road with us. So Jesus, may we learn from this sign. May we see you in the midst of our own story today. May we have the courage to stop and invite you in. We pray in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen.
Father's Day for me is not just a great day to remember being a dad and how great that is and honor my dad. It's also the day that I got baptized 30 plus years ago. This is my spiritual birthday. It's not the day that I said yes to Jesus. That was the day that he saved me at camp. But it was the day that I said I was going to stop just doing my own thing and do his thing. I see baptism as being something under the banner of discipleship first, more so than salvation. It's the time to say, I'm going to stop going my way, God, and I'm going to go your way. We have a moment today to stop and just enjoy this moment we call communion. And you have an option. You and I both do. We can just go through the motions, make it be a religious little holy shot of some juice and a little cracker. Or we can stop and just say, God, I want to go your way. There's some things in my life that I need to stop going my way. I need to go your way. And oh, friend, you're saved by what he's done. You're saved by his death for you on that cross that day. But maybe you're just kind of leaning into your salvation where you're like, yeah, I'm just saved. But you're not stepping into your discipleship. You're walking towards him. And today would be the moment where you say, okay, God, thank you for saving me. During this communion time, thank you. As you're sitting there with a little cup of juice and the wafer symbolic of his body broken, the juice symbolic of his blood shed, and you thank him for saving you. But then after that thankfulness, you just say, God, I got to confess, I've just been doing my own thing. I haven't been following you after my salvation. So Father, help me follow you. I want to stop these things and I want to go towards you. Maybe it's an attitude. Maybe it's a habit. Maybe it's just a general disconnect. So during this time of worship, we have this one last song too. If you need some prayer, I'll be over in that corner. I'll have a friend over here pray for you too. But if you also just need to maybe sit and just worship, maybe you just worship in a different way and you open your hands up. Chris, I'm not a hand opener. Okay. Well, maybe try that. Maybe you stand. Maybe you sit and you just say, okay, I'm going to stop trying to hold on to it. I'm going to let you just take this, God. And you just worship. Chris, I don't sing very well. That's okay. Read the words. The team picked this song on purpose to really give your soul the words on how to worship the Lord right now. So, you're now invited to go get your packets. If you didn't get them when you walked in, and come back to your seat. Don't wait for me. Take it whenever you're ready. If you need some prayer, head to the corners and just enjoy this time with hands open, hearts open, saying, God, I'm going to stop going my way, and I'm going to start going your way. Enjoy time with the Lord.